No one was ready for what was inside Freddie Mercury's London house when the doors were first opened to the public. It was chilly. We did see a big change. Everything seems different, including the houses. It doesn't make sense to believe it. Garden Lodge wasn't only a rock star's estate, it was also a place where people lived in silence for decades. It was a secret museum of love, loneliness, and genius. They uncovered everything from scribbled songs to strange art and tragic personal notes. What they found inside didn't simply amaze the globe, it moved it. His secret world of closeness. When the first people came to see Freddie Mercury's home at Garden Lodge, they thought it would be quite fancy. Gold, velvet, and rock star drama. They didn't expect to see the raw, private parts of a man who had kept his soul covered beneath the biggest voice in rock history. The most shocking items weren't the ones that stood out. Nor the crown, nor the garments worn on stage, not even the fancy art. It was the quiet things, the things that don't scream but whisper things that Freddie had never said before. The handwritten words to Bohemian Rhapsody, for example, are now famous. Written in Freddie's precise dramatic handwriting on sheets of notepaper, they demonstrate how the famous 6-minute epic changed from broken lines into the operatic masterpiece we know today. You can see the mistakes, the tests, and the raw power of creativity. But here's the thing. There was a line in one of the early drafts that was eliminated totally. "Mama, there's a fight going on outside." It shows us what the music may have been and reminds us of it. Even gods of music change their minds, question, and start over. That's when it really hits you. These aren't old things. They are signs of life. And they're all over the place. Auctioneers found a stack of love notes in a drawer that wasn't being used. Not from lovers, but from fans. Many of them are still around. Teenagers thanked him for making them feel like they mattered. Older fans spoke about how Queen's music helped them deal with loss, sickness, and heartbreak. Some were never opened. They were sealed envelopes from 1984 and 1986 that had been waiting for decades to be read. He retained them, even if Mercury didn't read them. That one thing says it all. Then, something that not many people expected happened, a slew of very intimate Polaroids. These weren't pictures of the red carpet or rock and roll. These were real, offstage, and frequently sweet. Freddie was relaxing in silk robes, smiling with pals, feeding his cats, and sleeping on the couch. No posing or makeup. Only Freddie. Human, weak, and unfiltered. One photo that really moves me depicts Mercury sitting alone at a piano, with only a desk lamp lighting it. The date is 1987, which is the same year he found out he had AIDS. His posture is stooped, and he doesn't have any of his typical dramatic flair. It's not sick. It's personal. This was a man who was continuously composing music, even though he knew he was about to die. There was a birthday card from his longtime boyfriend, Jim Hutton, that said, "To my love, forever." And next to it was a silver frame with a picture of Mary Austin, the woman Mercury had dubbed his common-law wife. Until the day he died, both pictures were next to each other on his bedside table. This simple gesture showed what mattered most, love, and not the fake type, but the true, complicated, lasting kind. Even things that weren't emotional became emotional because of the situation. A little notebook with Mercury's daily to-do lists, such call mom, order flowers, and pick up Japanese print from framers. The legend gets smaller, just like that. All of a sudden, he's not the famous guy in tights anymore. He's a father, a collector, and a man who is striving to finish everything before dinner. One of the most powerful discoveries, and one that made many people cry, was located in a drawer next to his writing desk. A pile of goodbye letters Freddie had composed but never sent. Most of them didn't have a date on them, were written in beautiful handwriting, and were sent to friends or no one in particular. One read, "If you're reading this, it means I didn't get to say it in person. Don't be quiet when you mourn me." No public comment, turn up the volume. No big goodbye. Just these private goodbyes, lingering in the dark. We might think we knew Freddie Mercury. The videos, the interviews, and the concerts are all part of pop culture. But this? This was not the same. Garden Lodge was more than just a place to live. It was a safe. A location where the real Freddie Mercury existed in things and in ink. He was a sensitive, shy, messy, and sentimental person. The shock wasn't in the wealth. It was in the closeness. We saw the artist before the show, the man before the myth, and the world met him for the first time. Freddie Mercury's taste at home was surprisingly calm, even though he used to parade around the world's biggest stages in rhinestone leotards and royal cloaks. Yes, it's weird. Yes, lavish. But not the noisy, messy luxury you might expect from one of rock's most over-the-top front men. Instead, Garden Lodge showed something that wasn't expected. A collector's intellect, a cat lover's heart, and an artist's sense for beauty. Freddie's passion was one of the most shocking things. It really was an obsession. With Japanese art and old things. We're talking about hundreds of items, such fragile woodblock prints, lacquerware, silk kimonos, netsuki that are delicately carved, tiny ivory or wooden sculptures, and more porcelain than a museum wing. His collection wasn't simply good, it was museum quality. Experts at Sotheby's were amazed by the quality and variety. Mercury didn't just play around. He read up on curated and knew precisely what he was getting. He previously said, "I'm a collector. I've always been interested in the finer things in life. Japanese art has a balance and mystery. I couldn't help myself." Walking around his house was like walking through a gallery in Kyoto, but without the red carpets and paparazzi. These things weren't there to be seen. They were quite private. They were the consequence of years of travel, quiet evenings, and a real joy of making things. His dining room, where he held fancy dinners for Elton John, David Bowie, and Liza Minnelli, was set up like a minimalist Japanese tea room, with low lighting, screens, and perfect symmetry. It wasn't showy. It was quiet. And maybe that's the most surprising part. There was a man behind the stadium songs and theater costumes who wanted peace, order, and a little mystery. And then there were the cats. Cats weren't the only thing Freddie Mercury liked. He loved them. At one point, he is said to have lived with 10 of them, each having their own room, toys, and clothes. Yes, wardrobes. Some were saved. Some were gifts. They were all spoilt. What are their names? Nico, Delilah, and Goliath. Romeo, Lily, Oscar, Tiffany, and others. If you think this is sweet, you won't believe what they found inside Garden Lodge. He had custom-made oil paintings of his cats in fancy, gold-plated frames. One wall contained a whole exhibition of photos of their best times. There were hand-painted plates with their names on them, small sweaters, and birthday cards from Freddie, of course. The lyrics of the song Delilah, which is on the album Innuendo, don't even try to hide that it was written for one of his favorite cats. "You make me so happy, Delilah. When you kiss me, I go crazy." It's cute, but it also shows a lot. These cats weren't just pets. They were like family. They were there for each other during long evenings and made each other laugh when they were sick. And peace and quiet when the outside world grew too loud. And the cat stayed in the house, where very few visitors were permitted in after he was diagnosed. Always faithful and cherished. Freddie didn't completely give up on the flair, of course. He wasn't able to. There were moments of pure Mercury magic hidden amid the calm Japanese works and the fluffy cat shrines. He wore a crown and velvet robe that were constructed just for him, based on the genuine British monarchy, as well as crazy stage boots and mirrored sunglasses. But they were still stored carefully, usually in glass display cases or drawers lined with velvet. They weren't thrown in closets or put in boxes like old costumes. They were kept safe, like sacred objects. Freddie thought everything had a meaning. That's what made the house so amazing. It was more than just a house full of stuff. It was a story told through things. Every area was a chapter, and every item was a sentence. Some were loud, some murmured, but collectively they made a picture that no biography could ever make. And let's be clear about this. This wasn't hoarding by famous people. This wasn't about how much stuff I bought. It was planned, curated, and almost intellectual. Mercury treated his things like buddies. There was a place for everything. Everything was shown off, adored, and respected. His clothes were even an archive. Hundreds of silk shirts that were perfectly folded, handmade jackets, and beautiful shoes, all sorted by color, designer, and occasion. Fashion was more than simply an element of the show. It was a part of him. Freddie once said that he always dressed up for dinner, even when he was eating alone, in case someone important, like himself, showed up. Many visitors, enthusiasts, and even expert appraisers were impressed by how emotive these collections were. You start to comprehend someone when you observe how they lived, what they chose to be around, and what they held close. And this is what Garden Lodge showed. There was a man behind the loud voice and flashy showmanship who loved calm beauty, found peace in porcelain and purring, and made every area in his house signify something. Freddie Mercury was more than just a singer. He was in charge of his own cosmos. And because of these findings, the world finally got to see it. But what happened when this private world, which had been meticulously protected for decades, was suddenly open to everyone? The auction that set records and devastated hearts. Fans all across the world were shocked when they heard that Freddie Mercury's personal items were going up for auction. For decades, Garden Lodge was a shut-off sanctuary, a secret world that Mary Austin had trapped in time. Mercury once named this woman the love of my life. She got the house and everything in it after he died in 1991. She chose to keep everything just the way he left it. Nothing had changed in more than 30 years. And now, all of a sudden, everything was all being shown and sold. The auction was not just any old auction. It was Sotheby's, one of the best-known and most respected auction houses in the world. They didn't only put price tags on Mercury's things. They put together a whole exhibition, making Garden Lodge a cultural event. 4 weeks before the sale in 2023, people from all around the world stood in queue outside Sotheby's London galleries, waiting for hours to see room after room packed with Mercury's things, just like they were in his home. It felt like a dream. You could stand only a few inches away from his scribbled lyrics to "We Are the Champions," look at the piano he wrote on, admire his Japanese kimonos, and even get a glimpse of his favorite cat-themed salt and pepper shakers. It was like getting into his head or heart. And suddenly the hammer began to fall. The bidding war was just amazing. The Yamaha Baby Grand piano that Freddie wrote several of Queen's biggest singles on sold for an unbelievable £1.7 million. The crown and red velvet robe he donned on Queen's last tour in 1986? More than £600,000. A little silver Tiffany and mustache comb sold for more than £150,000. One of his famous show jackets sold for about £250,000. And what about those lyrics that were written by hand? Some sold for hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on the tune. Some fans were happy, while others cried. This wasn't simply a piece of memorabilia, though. This wasn't just a history of rock music. These were very personal items that Mercury had handled, lived with, and loved. For a lot of admirers, the auction felt like a slow-motion funeral, the last time they saw the universe Freddie made for himself. It seemed like saying goodbye every time something departed the auction floor. There were heated arguments on the internet and on fan communities. Some others thought Mary Austin had every right to sell the things. Freddie had given her everything, after all. For decades, she had kept his legacy safe. They said that it could be time to let the public know about it. Some people thought differently. One admirer said, "It feels like watching someone sell off pieces of someone's soul." Another person, who was more forgiving, replied, "At least we get to know him better now." Mary herself talked about the decision in public comments that were quite unusual before everything was hidden away. She said that she was in her 70s now and didn't want to give someone else the job of taking care of Mercury's things. She stressed that she wanted the auction to bring supporters closer to him, and in many respects, it worked. But that thought has some tension in it. Some things went to museums and collectors who vowed to keep them safe, but many more just went to private people. Freddie's things, such his favorite tea set, the painting that hung over his bed, and even his last scribbled grocery list, were all over the place. And with them went little bits of story, context, and connection. In the middle of all the noise, there were still beautiful moments. Admirer in Japan acquired one of Mercury's beautiful ukiyo-e prints and said they would give it to a gallery in Tokyo. A rich donor bought his famous stage jacket in hopes to take it on tour to schools and LGBTQ+ centers. One anonymous bidder, who was alleged to be a lifelong fan of Queen, spent thousands for Mercury's favorite waistcoat and said, "I just wanted to give something back to him." Even though there was a lot of money involved, the auction was never really about money. It was all about feelings. It was about how Mercury's life affected millions of people and how, even decades after his death, people still wanted to be near him, understand him, and own a piece of his enchantment, even if only for a short time. It's hard to watch a legacy be sold one lot at a time. But it's also strong to let it breathe again. For years, these things sat there without being used. They now enjoy new lives in houses, museums, and recollections. The auction may have set records, but it also broke hearts and opened them. And by doing so, it brought back memories of what Freddie Mercury really was. Not just a performer, but also a person, a collector, a lover, a friend, a mystery, and now more than ever, a legacy you can almost touch. What did all of these things truly say about the guy behind the legend, behind the auction and the headlines? Freddie's calm power, art, and identity. People might easily get caught up in the glitz and glam of Freddie Mercury's existence. The stadiums that were packed out, the four-octave voice, the crazy outfits, the ridiculous interviews, and the unshakable charm. But what people found inside his house was far more than just a rock star show. It opened the velvet curtain to show a life that was strongly connected to culture, identity, art, and history. These things weren't just things that belonged to a renowned person. They were things that had meaning in their life. To music, to culture, to history, and to the millions of people who are trying to find themselves in his story. One of the most interesting things I learned from the Garden Lodge collection was how much Mercury cared about keeping beauty alive. Not simply beauty in the body, but also beauty in the mind, culture, and art. For example, his large collection of paintings didn't follow trends or try to get him status. It showed a very personal taste in art. There were Japanese woodblock paintings, Art Deco glassware, Victorian silver, and even works by Salvador Dali on his walls and shelves. He was a man who saw worth in things that spoke softly and filled his life with items that told stories, even if no one else was listening. But this wasn't simply about what people liked. It was about who you are. Mercury, whose real name was Farrokh Bulsara, was born in Zanzibar to Parsi Indian parents. He grew up as an outsider in East Africa, then in a British boarding school in India, and eventually in England, where he made up a new identity, complete with a new name. The things in his house showed this layered personality in small ways. Hindu statues, Persian rugs, and Asian fabrics. There was no one story about the culture. There was only a mix of East and West, showiness and restraint, old traditions and new rebellions. To get the full impact of that, you need to know what Freddie Mercury meant to individuals who lived on the edge. He was a queer guy of color who made it to the very top of a business that was mostly white and male. And he did it the way he wanted to. He was never completely out in the way that people expect these days, but he also never denied himself. He didn't fit into any of the categories. He acted out both masculine and feminine roles with equal passion. He made the distinctions between diva and rock god, and between being weak and strong, less clear. He became a symbol of freedom because of how unclear he was. The things found in his house, especially the more personal ones, said a lot about how he was trying to balance things out. He was electrifying, unabashed, and wild on stage. But there were signs of loneliness off stage. Of silent desire. There were meticulously kept pictures, handwritten love letters, and soft drawings. These weren't just strange things about famous people. They showed that LGBT people lived their lives in full color, even when being seen could be perilous. Keep in mind that Mercury lived and died during the height of the AIDS crisis, when many famous people had to disguise their identities because they were afraid, ashamed, or afraid of public retribution. He died in 1991, just one day after telling the world he had AIDS. This was both a tragedy and a turning point. It made people around the world aware of the sickness and made them think about the price of staying quiet. But his residence showed that the expense of living is high, even at the top of the world. Some of the things that were found, such as secret stash of letters, a photo album with candid shots of lovers, and secret notes with intimate feelings, weren't simply personal. They were from the past. They conveyed the story of how LGBT lives were kept safe, documented, and safeguarded in private when the public world wouldn't accept them. They made us remember that Mercury wasn't only a famous person. He was a part of a much bigger story of strength, resistance, and survival. From a cultural point of view, the Garden Lodge collection also showed a man who understood heritage, not just his own, but the legacy of everything he cared about. His careful curation of furniture, preservation of rare books, and handwritten comments attached to treasures were not only sentimental tendencies. They were ways of conveying stories. Mercury was aware that he was making something that might be found one day. And he made sure it would speak for itself. The things in his house were from all over the world and from different time periods. They included 18th century Japanese lacquerware, 80s pop art, Persian calligraphy, and hand-drawn pictures of his pets. In a manner, Garden Lodge turned into a museum of Freddie Mercury's intellect, which was wild, brilliant, chaotic, compassionate, and completely his own. Historians are starting to see these things as more than just fan mementos, they are also seeing them as cultural artifacts. Museums have expressed interest in buying certain items for permanent displays. Researchers have said that Mercury's home is one of the best places to learn about the life of a queer immigrant artist in Britain in the late 20th century. That's not only unusual, it's worth a lot of money. The cultural importance goes beyond what he left behind. It's about the way he lived and how his life affected other people. The things that were found in Garden Lodge served to make a mythology less mysterious. But more crucially, they made him seem more human. He wasn't just a voice, a body, or a performer. He was a man who sought peace in beautiful things and cherished every letter from fans. He was always a son, a lover, and a seeker, and who worried about his friends. "I won't be a rock star," Freddie Mercury once stated. "I will be a famous person." He was both. But we now know that his reputation was formed not just in stadiums and on stage, but also in silence, alone, and the hallowed place of home. This is because of the riches he left behind and how they were finally shared with the world. What happens to a legend once the show is over and the voice fades away, but the love gets stronger? That's where the fans come in and Freddie's legacy becomes more than just a story. The everlasting symbol. Freddie Mercury was never just a rock star to most fans. He was a myth come to life, a voice that could shatter the sky, and a presence that could light up whole stadiums. A man who looked like he was bigger than life. But when the walls of Garden Lodge finally fell down, things changed. The myth didn't go away. It got worse. What was found within not only proved how amazing he was, but it also showed how human he was, which made his legacy even more important. Fans all over the world reacted right away and quite strongly. Some people waited in queue for hours outside Sotheby's only to spend 10 calm minutes with his things. People grieved openly in front of his scribbled lyrics, stayed quiet in rooms full of his furnishings, and murmured to each other like they were in a holy place. For a lot of people, it wasn't about the money or the fame. It was all about making connections. These were the things that were around Mercury in his latter years. He sat on this chair to listen to opera. He wore that robe to answer the door. These weren't fake. They were dead bodies. The reactions were just as strong online. Fans were recording every part of the show on TikTok, YouTube walkthroughs, and Instagram stories. Some people shared emotional breakdowns after witnessing his piano. Some people talked about how Queen's music rescued them, healed them, or helped them come out. A lot of individuals said the experience was like going to a shrine, not to a god but to someone who had secretly borne their grief and made it sing. And that's the thing, Freddie Mercury wasn't a far-off, untouchable person. Not to his fans. He was one of them, weird, awkward, artistic, misunderstood, brave, scared, and full of paradoxes. Fans felt closer than ever when his personal life was finally revealed, the cat bowls, the letters, the shopping lists, and the heartbreaks. What they found in his house didn't make the legend smaller, it made it bigger. But even while fans liked this new, more personal picture of Mercury, something else happened. The myth started to change. Before the auction, the public had a big say in what Mercury's legacy will be. The record-breaking shows, the music videos, the biographies, the statue in Montreux, the tribute concerts, and the movie Bohemian Rhapsody, for better or worse. But now, with the publication of hundreds of deeply personal items, a new way of presenting stories has come about. One told through things, not news stories. It wasn't just historians and critics who started to put together the quieter story of who Freddie was when the cameras weren't rolling and the throng had left. All of a sudden, little things turned into holy books. His address book, his passport, a pair of old shoes, and a recipe written in his own handwriting. These weren't just things. They were emotional time machines that took fans back to a period when a guy entered through a door, sat at a piano, poured tea, loved sincerely, and was afraid of dying. And they also made people see themselves in him. Mercury's return home, which felt like a homecoming, was huge for LGBTQ+ fans in particular. It gave a unique, uncensored look at a whole LGBT life. Not cleaned up, not sad, not tokenized. Just real. Not perfect. Wonderful. In private. Strong. He didn't have to come out to the press to be important. He lived his truth in every silk garment, every porcelain kitten, and every love letter he never sent. And now, fans could see that reality, touch it, and sometimes even literally carry it forward. The fans' reaction also started up conversations about how we should remember and honor the legacies of famous people. Should everything be kept the same, like Graceland? Should it be open to everyone? Is selling it a betrayal or a way to share? The argument will go on. But there is one thing that is clear. The way Mercury's legacy grew through his residence was unlike anything that had happened before. It didn't only make people feel nostalgic. It made people think about themselves. And then there's the question that Mercury would have probably laughed at. Would he have desired this? We can't say for sure. He was quite secretive, but he also liked to show off. He was quite protective of his home. But he bought art as if he were putting together his own museum. He knew others would want to know. He realized that his life didn't end with his death. And maybe, just maybe, he wanted the world to find him again. Not at a stadium, but in a silk robe next to a pile of old opera records, nursing a cat named Delilah. It could be that this is the myth's last change. Freddie Mercury, the lead singer of Queen who composed We Are the Champions and Don't Stop Me Now, wasn't merely a star who died too young. He was a person who made a life full of meaning, art, and beauty. The items he left behind have made the tale more than just about fame or sorrow. It's about love and picking happiness even when things are hard. About discovering the wonder in daily things and making the world a better place to live, even if you already know how the narrative ends. And so, as admirers all across the world show off a piece of his life, a teacup, a lyric sheet, a signed photo, a favorite book, the legacy of Freddie Mercury lives on, not just in playlists and on stage, but also in living rooms. In memories and in hearts. He didn't only leave a voice behind. There was a world he left behind. I don't want to be a star, Freddie Mercury declared once. I'm going to be a great person. And he was, but not in the way that most people imagined. The actual legend wasn't only the music, the shows, or the celebrity. It was in the letters that had tea stains on them, the faded Polaroids, and the handwritten lyrics. The ceramic kitties that were nicely kept. He filled the house with beauty, silence, and soul. People were horrified by what they found in Freddie Mercury's London home. It wasn't because it was scandalous, it was because it was so sad. There was a man behind all the glitz and glam who loved sincerely, collected carefully, and lived with quiet intensity. The world witnessed the celebrity for many years. Finally, they saw the individual. The sale may have broken up his things, but it also brought millions of people together in sadness, awe, and love. Fans saw themselves in how vulnerable he was. Historians found his life experiences useful. And the story of Freddie Mercury didn't become smaller, it became bigger. Loaded with emotion, paradox, and depth. Do you like Freddie? Please leave your thoughts in the comments below. For our additional uploads, please subscribe to the channel.